Right, shall we move on?
So moving on.
Item 9.
Yep. Item 9, Councillor Remuneration. Where are you running to, Leah?
This one's not Leah's. She's very grateful it's not.
So, welcome, Helen.
Thank you. The paper is before you. This is a report that comes every triennium. The recommendation is in accordance with status quo from previous 3 triennium. So I'm happy to expand further, otherwise I can answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. So, we'll just move and second it, isn't it?
Yeah, you want to move her and second her?
So is anyone, Jake will move it, Kelly will second it. You've just missed out by a few seconds there, Kelly. So we've got any debate? Aaron?
I think...
Yeah, I'm happy to receive this and I'll be voting for it as it stands, but it will be an interesting debate that I will look forward to hearing from all my fellow councillors who just argued and voted against any councillor who does extra work being paid extra money. I believe if I ask my fellow colleagues to do more work on behalf of this city that they and take on more responsibilities, then they should be paid more. Because there is a bigger workload. I accept that. I think our previous Deputy Mayor, Andrew, did a really, really good job. I saw the work he did. He was paid more for it, and no one at this table complained about him doing more work and being paid more money for it. So far in this term, I've seen Pauline Cotter do the same. She stepped up and does more work than everyone else, and so I'm happy for her to be paid more money. Now, I'd love to hear from the rest of you why that didn't apply to the previous paper, but it may apply to this one. Thank you.
Oh, just really. So I'd like to move an amendment.
Yes, please.
The amendment differs to what I'd put forward yesterday, which was essentially asking that we freeze the salaries that we were on, noting the fact that it's potentially not legally possible to reduce the size of the governance pool that the Remuneration Authority have already set, I believe, mid last year. So the amendment I'm putting forward simply states, adding to what we've got here, it's not replacing any wording, it's just adding to, which is requesting that the Remuneration Authority make no additional increases to the size of the governance remuneration pool for the remainder of this triennium ending October 2025. So essentially it's adding a number 4. It's not replacing anything in here.
Okay.
Can we just get that? Have you written it down? Or is it on your screen?
Yeah, it is on my screen. Don't let me flick it through to you.
Do you want to...
Okay, so we'll just pause for a second for Andre's amendment to get with the people at...
Coming up, we just need to adjust the numbering. So, Andre, if that looks... So this is his amendment.
It's an amendment.
So yes, it's essentially deleting all of that.
Have you got it on your device? Could you please bring your device around so we can just copy?
Yeah.
You're not removing 2 and 3.
It probably would have been helpful if this had been tabled earlier, given there was a discussion at length yesterday about it.
Mm-hmm. No, you didn't.
What I put it forward a couple of days ago to discuss. Yeah.
Maybe it is just because you knew, but
didn't finish. It ended quite abruptly.
maybe it is just because you knew, but normally you circulate the stuff to the Secretariat, so we don't wait.
Yes, it was
Because we are being paid for by the ratepayer. You do adopt the note. Look around the room. How many junior managers are in here waiting? So there's not a cost, there's a productivity cost.
Members, you were doing so
We
well.
don't
Go on.
value productive input in this case. We don't value productive input.
We've been doing very good today so far, ladies and gentlemen. We've just got to go into PX after this. So where is they haven't got his one up here yet, have they? In there.
Who's no? It's
No,
just going
it's
on
just
now.
coming now.
It's just there. We've got it on the.
So I checked with Helen, and I was going to ask her when it's public again. It is unfortunate that the REM authority.
Yeah, well, you know, they're going to step on their own toes. Just put it betterment the other way around. Yeah, that would be honourable. Yes. It makes a difference to
Helen, the Mayor will be asking you a question shortly.
Yep.
Okay, people, we are back. So we now have Councillor Moore's amendment up there on the screen. I've just got a question of Helen, please, and bearing in mind what's written there in the amendment. Over the last 3 years, when I was a councillor way back, and it was always unfortunate that REM Authority came in about a month after we started, and it was like, hello, we're in here, we're going to pay ourselves a fortune, which wasn't the case. Over the last 3 years, there hasn't been any increases in the interim period. It's only seems to be every 3 years.
That's correct. There was no changes to the size of the pool
Yes.
for the previous triennium.
But that's not set in concrete. They could if they wanted. They meet every year, from what I understand.
That's right, but they have not for the previous triennium.
Correct. So just so I'm on the right track, this increase is around about 3%.
Yes.
It makes no bearing on me because I'm separate, but it's 3%. So in theory, we have had a 3% increase over 3 years, which is 1% a year.
Yes, you can look at it that way.
That's
Yes.
from that way. Thank you very much. Good. So we now have we got any more questions before I bring the amendment up? Tim?
Yeah, as I read this, Andres, it's if they make a change during the 3 year period, but they never have they? Did they? Oh, okay.
It's possible,
Just clarifying.
Councillor, but it's unusual.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, generally all the REM authority increases around 1% per annum.
I can't answer that before the last 3 years. They take a number of different factors into account when they set the size of the pool, which is summarised in the report.
And what about other government departments? Do you know if they're all sitting on around a 1% increase per annum?
I'm afraid I can't answer that.
Okay.
Jake? And then Victoria?
So the Remuneration Authority, can you just explain why it's there and what its role is, and why we don't just make this decision outright?
So the Remuneration Authority is set up by legislation to set the pools and the remuneration for different public entities, including local authorities. They also set the rates for the Prime Minister and members of Parliament and other duties as well. And the reason for that is to have a degree of independence so that it is not councillors making decisions themselves. You have the ability to input and recommend, but it is not this council's decision what councillors are remunerated at.
Okay. Sorry, Victoria. Thanks. And then Aaron.
Helen, just from a legal perspective, can you confirm that we actually can't bind the Remuneration Authority? All we can do is to make a recommendation, but we can't bind them.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Does the Rem Authority consider a city councillor a full-time role?
They consider this council at equivalent of a full-time role, yes.
So what's an MP?
That's a question for the Remuneration Authority I can't answer.
Right, so that's a full-time times two?
The length of time involved in governing an authority of this size is one of the factors they look at, but there's a number of other factors that the Remuneration Authority considers before it makes a determination.
Right, okay, interesting.
Okay, so Kelly, please.
Thanks, Helen. So could you just explain why the mayor and deputy mayor are paid more than the city councillors?
So
what's the Remuneration Authority's view on that?
So the mayor is set separately. All mayors for all local authorities in New Zealand are set separately. In relation to deputy mayor, the decision or the recommendation to remunerate the deputy mayor differently is a matter for all individual councillors to explain and justify to the Remuneration Authority, and they will take it into account before they make a decision.
Okay, thank you.
There is no automatic change in remuneration for a deputy mayor.
Okay.
Okay, we're all good. So I'm now going to ask Councillor Moore. He's obviously the mover. So I need a seconder for, and that's Yanni. Thank you. So now put that.
Yeah, now put the amendment.
I'd now like to put the amendment. All those in favour?
Are you going to say no debate?
Oh, sorry. Does anyone want to have any debate?
I think you need to still.
I'll get the amendment done first. Okay. Is there any debate on the amendment? Aaron?
So normally I would always, generally from the position I've come from in the past, is I would always support this. I think it makes sense. We send these notes through and they mostly get ignored, and that's their prerogative because they probably shouldn't be told what to do by councillors. But and I would usually support this, but given what's happened in the last 3 years across the country, I don't know that it would be super wise to lock in decisions like this when inflation was not predicted to get where it got to. The economy was predicted to crash after COVID. It didn't. It bounced back for many reasons. Most of all were unpredicted, even by the experts. So you cannot map what inflation will do over the next 3 years. So it's currently 7-8%. It could stay at 7 or 8% every year. Could go up more because this was unpredicted. Other countries have gone double digits. So if that happens, you could be looking at, in the term of making this decision, up to a 25% pay decrease. Just saying, for then, as you head forward into the future and you look at the next election, who's then putting their hands up? Because yes, people can say, oh, people put their hand up to become a city councillor, it's a really well-paid role, so on and so forth, and I think it is. But once it becomes not a well-paid role, or let's make it a really low-paid role, then only the ruling elite will send along their spouses to run the city because they will already have a great income in their household, and you wind the clock back 100-odd years where the big landowners and stuff like that had their family members go and run the cities and make the decisions for the poor people in the neighbourhoods that are paying all the bills. So careful what you vote for just here, because if you can predict the economy, you are sitting in the wrong place.
Sam.
You got some
Sam.
Yeah, I normally have a rule where I don't debate these because I don't think we should actually be involved in our own pay at all. But I guess this is, I will oppose this, and I say that for the reason that there is a legislative ability for Wellington to set a pool of money so that we don't have to have these kind of debates. Quite frankly, I don't care whether it's $100 or whatever it says in there, the pool's whatever it is, 1.8 million. That's actually irrelevant. It's an independent setup for that very purpose. So I don't want this council to fall into the trap of dictating to Wellington, particularly on our own pay. I think we should focus our dictation around housing and Three Waters as opposed to our own pay. And the other point, I'll just say it now so I don't debate it later, is, I'm happy to support the recommendations because I do think we should reward the Deputy Mayor for extra work. I do note that, saying that I also chair the only other committee of the whole, the Finance and Performance Committee and the Insurance Subcommittee, and am quite happy to acknowledge that I won't take additional remuneration for that. So I just want everyone, because I know we had a tense debate around directors' fees, to acknowledge that while some people may think there's an element of greed in this, this is not about money. This is about the principle behind it. And I'm quite happy to take on a far more additional responsibility on behalf of the city with some pretty big roles, but not charge extra for them in that respect. So I just think when we have debates like this that kind of get frustrating because we're effectively virtue signalling to Wellington, when actually there is a purpose that Wellington, that Parliament, the elected people of New Zealand have set up for this very reason, that we shouldn't go and underwrite that when it's something so trivial as, quite frankly, our own pay.
Thank you, Sam. Celeste.
I wasn't going to comment on this, but why the hell not? I do agree that it is there is a good reason to keep this separate from our own sort of commentary. I think that it is important to keep our remuneration separate. And there is a process for doing that. Having said that, I can see the principle behind this, which is about recognising that we are in a well-paid job and that there is value in signalling and in showing that we are aware that across the organisation people are sometimes not getting pay increases. We have had a pay increase for some sectors of the council. So I think this is a challenging one and I haven't quite made up my mind, but I do actually want to acknowledge Councillor Moore for bringing it to the table because I do think it's something that actually we should acknowledge at least in principle. Thank you.
Okay, Victoria, then Tim, then Pauline.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For me, it's pretty black and white. Again, this is an independent remuneration authority, and the wording there is independent. They have a job to do. They have done their job, and as I asked of Helen, that we cannot bind the remuneration authority. So, quite frankly, it's quite a nonsense. And I'm with Sam. We shouldn't be debating about our own remuneration.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Look, if some around the table feel that their pay is excessive, then they are open to giving what they believe excess to the Mayor's Welfare Fund.
Thank you. Pauline?
Yeah, look, I'm very much echoing what Sam has spoken about with the Remuneration Authority and the reason that they are there, which has been very clearly explained by Helen. Thank you. We shouldn't be discussing our own money. And also, it's clear in the report that the Remuneration Authority uses a very strong tools when they arrive at their determination, and they look at the whole country, and it's not just looking at us. So they've arrived at this amount by themselves, without us, and that's true and correct and proper in my view. And if we were to even support that amendment, I think is actually undermining their position. And I don't think it's a really, really good thing to do. The other thing is that fast forward a few years to a new council, if the authority did listen to us and say, well, this council wants less money, they don't agree with our view of their workload and what we're worth, and if they did support that amendment themselves, the future council may face a determination from an authority for a massive increase to bring us back in line with the rest of New Zealand. And then that would not be a very good look for that council to be supporting that recommendation of possibly 20%, who knows. So I can't see myself supporting that because I think we're undermining the very reason that they're there. Also, I will indicate that I will sit back from number 2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jake?
Yeah, look, I don't think we should touch this with a 10-foot barge pole, quite frankly. We should stay well clear of issues like this. You'd never expect to see a judge making a public comment on their remuneration, and RA sets their pay as well. Having said that, I support the principle of what Andre has put forward in terms of, you know, people are going through a tough time, and they don't want to, they want to think that we're being prudent as well. So for that reason, I will abstain on it, because I just don't think we should be discussing it at all.
Okay, Tyrone.
So I actually really want to support what people have said around the table, in particular what Councillor McDonald and Councillor Henstock said. I thought that was very, very well articulated. But I've long found the methodology of the Remuneration Authority suboptimal. On Banks Peninsula, the board chair receives less than any board members on the flatlands, but has to work incredibly hard in a territory that covers 70% of the city's land area. But look, I think in a time when people are doing it tough, the methodology isn't sophisticated enough to take into the nuances of the macro and microeconomic situation. So that said, I do support the spirit of Andre's amendment, but I also support the arguments put forward by various, including Victoria and Sam. So I'm going to abstain on this one.
Okie dokie. So we've got Tyler and then Yanni, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, I want to address the really bad camera angle that comes down in here. It's really bad. But secondly, around Andre's amendment, I do appreciate the spirit of it. But as everyone was talking about before, was the process is flawed, and it needs a good review around the way that we talk about our money, which we shouldn't be doing. And we do know, and I know everybody in council knows, that we are remunerated for what we do, and we're all in the community. And just going back to what people were talking about, workloads, I mean, everybody has different workloads here. Everybody does, and every community has different needs, and we have different engagements to turn up to. For a prime example is meeting up to awesome ethnic events and getting awesome food. So that's the perk of the job. So I'd really like to appreciate that. So I am going to abstain on the fact that the process is flawed. But I do tautoko Andre's sentiment around what we're looking at. So, kia ora.
Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to support the additional resolution. I think this isn't a case of us seeking to bind the Remuneration Authority. This is simply making a request. We have done this previously in terms of COVID, when COVID first hit. And it's perfectly within our right to express a view to the Remuneration Authority, acknowledging what's going on. One of the roles of the Remuneration Authority, or one of the factors that they need to consider, is fairness to both those being remunerated and the ratepayer. And what we know, and we'll soon get the revaluations, we know what impact that will have on some of the people in our community who will, I think, struggle to deal with the increased percentage that they will be facing. So I think it's more than reasonable to put forward this request to the Remuneration Authority. It recognises that we are actually well paid, and there are people in our community that will be struggling with the huge increase in cost of living, including rates, at a time when some of them may be losing their jobs, maybe not getting increases in remuneration, and I think this is the right thing to do for the term. I think it is good that the Remuneration Authority sets a pool so that when people stand for the election, they know what the remuneration will be. People can freely make the choice whether they choose to stand based on the remuneration that's been set and what the workload expected is. And I think it's fair that that is set for the full triennium rather than have an increase in this time when people are struggling.
Okie dokie, thank you very much. So now we're going to talk to Andre.
Well, it's my amendment. I haven't
of
said
course,
anything.
feel free.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So ideally, we wouldn't have to discuss these types of issues. I agree. But the reality is, every 3 years, this gets put forward before council that we have to make a vote on and talk about. So while it's all well and good to say we shouldn't have to talk about it, we do, because these things have come across council table all the time, and it comes across several months into a new term. And it's not ideal timing. A new council is trying to rebuild trust. It's trying to set a tone. In this case, this term, we need to set a tone that we're willing to show some financial restraint. But then, of course, these types of decisions are put forward by the authority very early on in the term. It doesn't make that process a whole lot easier when you're trying to rebuild trust, when you're trying to set a tone that we need to show financial restraint. So I guess it's something I'd clear up as well, is this is not asking for a pay freeze forever. The wording says for this triennium ending October 2025. So if the authority decided that they wanted to increase the size of the pool mid-term, well, that wouldn't happen until 2024 or 2025 anyway, and they may not even do that. And if they did, what we're asking is that it wouldn't kick in until October 2025. So instead of us having to accept pay rises mid-term, it would kick in between terms, and it means that the public can vote to elect whichever councillors they so choose to, who would then get that increased salary. So instead of it being up to us, it would then actually be up to the public, who would essentially get any pay rises, because they would decide whether to elect them or not. This isn't going to lower rates for anyone, so some could argue it's essentially a virtue signal, but I think it's a pretty important and actually worthwhile signal that we can send to ratepayers that we're willing to show some financial restraint and lead by example in doing so ourselves, because next year come long-term plan, actually we're going to have to ask ratepayers to do some pretty heavy lifting, because to be able to afford everything we've committed to is not going to be easy. It's either going to be rate rises, we're going to have to make some pretty substantial cuts somewhere. So I think it's a worthwhile signal to send at the start of a term. And we do have the option to say nothing to the authority, or we can use the opportunity to make it clear that we actually aren't overly happy with the process that we have to go through at the start of every term. So we can either say nothing or just use the opportunity to say something. All it is making a request. I understand we can't bind the authority to anything, but it is just making a request. It's making a suggestion, request, whatever you want to call it, but I think it is a worthwhile signal to send to ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. I will now put the amendment. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
I think you need a division.
Yeah, we have to do a division.
Okay. The Mayor.
No.
Deputy Mayor Cotter.
The Mayor wasn't. Thank you.
Councillor Barber.
No.
Councillor Coker. Councillor Donovan.
Yes.
Councillor Fields. Councillor Goff.
No.
Councillor Harrison Hunt. Councillor Henstock.
No.
Councillor Johansson. Yes. Councillor Kewen.
No.
Councillor MacDonald.
No, we shouldn't be voting on it. It's embarrassing.
Councillor McClellan.
Abstain.
Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Councillor Peters.
We shouldn't be voting on this, no.
Councillor Scandrett.
No.
Councillor Templeton.
Aye.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 against.
Okay.
The
So-
amendment is
The amendment is lost, so we'll now move straight on.
moved to
We'll go
substantive.
straight on to the other one.
Substantive.
We've all had our debate, so I'll put the motion on the main one that's up there.
Can you please? Can you
Okay.
bring the decision up, please?
Do you want a debate? We've done debate. You're out of order.
Can you please pull it down?
So we're going to vote on this here. Okay? All of those in favour of this, right in front of you, please say aye.
You just said, Mr. Mayor, that you were debating the amendment. So
You did say that.
What did he debate?
You did say that, man. You did say
Okay,
debate
right.
the
So
amendment.
if anyone, before we go any further, if anyone would like to debate the substantive, thank you, Councillor Gott.
Thank you very much for indulging me, Your Worship and fellow councillors. I'll try and make it quick. But look, I actually just wanted to say that this is a serious role, and I'm going to support this. But it is kind of funny, isn't it? We have to just take a moment to acknowledge the irony that the chief point in the last item was literally that councillors that undertake additional work should not receive additional recompense. And that was the line that was recycled the most, which ensured that this council by majority voted that through. And then we are literally voting here to pay a councillor additional recompense because they undertake additional work, which I entirely agree with, and I will be supporting it. But I just wanted to say that the irony is not lost on me. The only difference is there is no additional legal liability in the role, unlike the last one. However, I am totally supportive of remunerating the Deputy Mayor more because I do believe that additional workload and liability, but not liability in this case, should in fact be rewarded. So I am supporting the recommendations there and very happy to.
Okay, Victoria.
I usually don't add anything if I don't think I've got anything to add, but I'm with him. I couldn't have said it any more articulately. The irony is not lost on me, and I will be supporting it because I acknowledge that additional work that our Deputy Mayor does.
Mark Bignani.
Thank you. I fully agree with Councillor Keown and Goff and Henstock there. The irony is definitely not lost on me that those arguing strongest against the director's fees are being rewarded for the extra work, and I don't begrudge that, but I think the Deputy Mayor does a great job and does a lot of extra work which none of us do, so that's to be honoured and respected. But I will be supporting this, and I find it very ironic and painful that as new councillors we're asked to debate this sort of thing about our own remuneration. That's why the Remuneration Authority is there, to take this pain away from everyone. And to hear the rhetoric around the city about us voting on our own salaries is just mischievous. This is nothing that any of us want to do. It's something we kind of have to do, and that's why we have the Remuneration Authority doing it independently in spite of us. So I'm happy to support this. And
thank you. Yanni?
Yeah, I have to say, I find it ironic that the ones that have expressed irony of what's going on haven't proposed amendments to remunerate the councillors based on the attendance percentage of briefings, meetings, community board meetings, appointments to external organisations, charitable trusts, residents associations and community events. So it's not a case of us saying that we don't have additional work and people shouldn't be recommended or remunerated extra for the additional work. In fact, that for some of us, the feeling is that we all have a role to play. We all do a huge amount of additional work outside of just coming to the formal council meetings, and that inherently it's unfair to pay directors more when actually they may not be doing more work than the rest of us. They just have a different responsibility. So it is incredibly ironic that there hasn't been amendments put by those who are expressing concern and irony at what's being proposed. I totally support the distribution of this governance pool in this way. I think it is inherently a fairer system of remuneration than having the whole political bun fight over who chairs what to get paid more.
That's ironic. Tyrone. Yes, please.
Look, it is a nonsense that we're having this debate. I just want to say that the reason that Pauline is getting paid more is because we all know she's worth it, and she is absolutely worth it. So I absolutely support that.
Kelly, and then Sam.
Yeah, very happy to second this, and I just want to reiterate what everyone else is saying about Pauline. I think she does a fantastic job. And yes, I am trying to embarrass you. I think you put in a power of work, and the last Deputy Mayor did the same thing, and I'm really happy that you are being recompensed for that. So, yeah, just wanted to support you.
I just think it's hopefully I'm the last one to speak, and we can kind of add a bit of dignity back to this debate. let's fundamentally remember why we're here. We are tasked legally by Wellington to determine how we split a pool of remuneration. No one likes doing it, but in the end, we've determined that we will recognise the Deputy Mayor for some additional duty. So, as much as we joke and laugh, and I think this is going to look appalling publicly, I do hope we can add a bit of decorum back to this and kind of go, actually, we're entrusted on behalf of the people of Christchurch to do the work on their behalf. The money should never be a driving factor for people. We're tasked with the legislative ability to do it. So can we kind of just add a wee bit of respect and dignity back to what we're doing?
Yep. Andre.
Thank you. I also wanted to point out the irony of, for the amendment discussion, what I heard a number of times was we shouldn't be debating remuneration. Then it got to the next item and everyone all of a sudden was keen to debate remuneration. This doesn't make any sense, and I'd like to point out the irony of that to close it off.
Right. Now, I will put the substantive. Everybody in favour of what you see on the screen, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Ooh.
And note that Councillor Cotter.
Carried, thank you very much. Good. So, shall we have a break before PX? Or go on to PX never, right?
You could go into PX and then...
Right. We're now going to move. I now resolve we exclude the public as set out on pages 90 and 91.